teachers of Reddit. What student will you never forget? My second year teaching, I had a student who came in late on the first day of school. His parents had registered him that morning. He came in shy and embarrassed, but no problem, we stopped what we were doing. I grabbed a desk and a name tag and asked him what his name was. He didn't know his last name. This should have been a red flag, but I chalked it up to the fact that he was a second grader thrown into a scary situation. I'll let it be. The more I worked with him, the more I knew something was going on. He was a native English speaker. English was his only language, and there were a lot of words he didn't know. He'd ask to take off his feet shoes. He'd speak like Yoda. He never really learned how to spell or even recognize his name. He had motor skills problems, and he just generally had a lot of gaps in his knowledge. He couldn't count forwards or backwards. I recommended him for testing, but due to policy, I needed to try a few rounds of different interventions first. There was another student in the class who he called his cousin. This other student said, "Oh, we are not actually cousins. Our dads are friends and my grandma helps out his family with food and a house and things." Fair enough. I got an alert one day that his paperwork was finally filled out, so I looked into his file, and that kid was right. The students weren't cousins. They were half brothers, but they didn't know. The guy this kid was calling uncle was actually his father. Everyone knew, and they thought it would be best to just lie to him about his real father. They also faked bank statements and bills to give a fake address so they could enroll in the school. Despite the school having open enrollment where you can attend the school without living in the school district, I realized this kid was not dealt an easy hand. Then his mom had a meltdown and went to an inpatient facility. I was working my ass off with this kid academically, but my goal now was to be sure he felt happy and loved. His family continued to be weird. We knew they were low income, and the school reached out at them at the holiday time to see if they'd like to anonymously benefit from the holiday toy drive. They ignored every call and email, and eventually the counselor just dropped off the gifts. They sat unopened in the garage for months. At the end of the year we got him tested. His IQ was 69. 70 is the baseline for legal mental retardation. Around this time his mom found out she was pregnant again, number 4. At age 27, she went back to the inpatient facility. I ended up moving after that year. I always think about this kid, hoping that he's getting the help he needs to succeed and live his best life. I was a young teacher then, and I don't think I'll ever forget about him. Teaching ESL in Taiwan, I joked with a young student and told him I was hungry. Not knowing I speak Chinese, he responded with Kai Da Bin, which translates to eat. Not a teacher anymore, but there are so many of them. I'll never forget the little boy who was abused from birth to age 3 before he was finally taken away from his mother, who was struggling with a serious drug addiction, and adopted by his maternal grandmother. He had some delays, but he was such a smart little kid who absolutely loved dinosaurs. I'll never forget the student who didn't have anything to give me for Christmas, but he wanted to give me something so badly that he taped his fruit roll up from his lunch onto a piece of paper and handwrote a Christmas card. I'll never forget the kid who sobbed in my lap at recess when her mother was going through chemotherapy because she was terrified. Months later, this same kid came running down the hallway and literally leapt into my arms while screaming, "Miss N, my mom is going to be okay." I'll never forget the kid who noticed that my pencil jar for students who needed pencils was empty, so he filled it with his own. I'll never forget the little girl who came to school every day with dirty clothes, sometimes the same clothes she had on the day before. She made her lunch herself at 6 years old, and she never had anything fresh or healthy. It was generally packaged because that's what they had. She would also hug anyone and everyone because she was so desperate for affection. I was a student teacher, but the principal was trying to get authorities involved by the time I left. I hope she got help. I'll never forget the kid who emailed me on the weekends and over holidays, just to tell me what's going on and to say hello. There are so many more. I could go on for ages. I was getting my middle school certification in my state. This was maybe 3-4 years ago, and my college would place us in local schools in the area to partner with an accomplished teacher and get our observation hours in. The college had a reputation of putting male teacher candidates in the roughest schools in the area. Me and my fellow male students had a theory about this, but of course we can't prove it. Anyway, my first morning there, in a very rough all boys middle school in the worst part of the city. First period, a little boy maybe 10, 11 walks into class, looks at me, and says, "What are you looking at? You Ryan Gosling looking Methodica." I was utterly speechless. LOL. I can only assume that was his catch-all term for white men. LOL. I'll definitely never forget him. Haha. I'm a speech therapist, so I work with the students who have disabilities or special needs. One of my students started with me in kindergarten. Let's call him Frankie. He had autism and just a tiny bit of language, and a lot of behaviors. But something about him I absolutely loved. He walked like an old man, and had a mop of blonde hair. I adored him, even though a lot of the other staff classified him as a difficult kid. He had a difficult home life and unsupportive parents, which made his behaviors a lot worse. But he never had them with me. As he got older, he had more outbursts and tantrums, but they would always call me over to calm him down. When COVID hit, Frankie's parents weren't able to get him onto the computer to do remote learning, and I left to work at a different school in September, so I never got to say goodbye to him. I know he's probably doing okay this year, but it breaks my heart that I can't be the one to be there for him anymore, and I just hope he understands why I'm not there. A wonderful young man who was killed in a car accident back in early June 2020. He was in his grade 11 year. Took him under my wing in grade 9. Worked on his impulsive behavior, colorful language, anger management and questionable life choices. By grade 10, he was a mentor to incoming grade 9s that had similar issues as himself. In grade 11, he was a leader here in the school, volunteering, joined the arts community, and held down 2 after-school jobs. We shook hands every day. He'd bring me coffee. His last text to me said, "Life is beautiful, man," and he had recently told me that he wished that I was his dad. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt coming home from one of those jobs. He was killed instantly after being ejected from a car he was a passenger in. My commute to and from work every day passes by the exact spot he was killed. Miss you, Edward. I teach at a prison. The first inmate I had graduate under my teaching cried when he looked at his diploma. He was the first in his entire family to graduate. It was quite the accomplishment, and I was very moved. This kid Jay, 10 years old with a learning disability, was struggling at home, divorce, living with grandma, and at school. It was my first year teaching, and he would often lash out to get attention and be purposely annoying to see if he could get a rise out of me. Pretty soon it became clear that he was just lonely and isolated, so he needed a friend. After getting to know him for a couple of weeks, I was happy to become his friend that year, and he and I became so close that he would bend over backwards trying to catch up on work just so he could hang out with me. I saw him struggle pretty heavily, even with one-on-one support, but apart from a couple of moments of crisis, he kept his nose to the grindstone and worked hard every day. This isn't a movie, so he still wasn't the best student in the class, but he made so much progress compared to the beginning of the year that every time I even thought about calling out or taking it easy, either Jay needs me, and he did. At my school, we get a lot of refugees from the Middle East and South Asia. I had a student Iraqi talk to me about her trip over. They fled when IS was starting to take over their city. Her father stayed behind to help others get out. They got a notice that he was being held ransom a few days later. They paid the ransom, and in return, was sent an image of his headless body. She was an incredibly happy, jovial young woman. I can't even imagine what kid of pain she must have went through. I heard many stories of fleeing war and strife, but that one was probably the worst for me. Big Mike. I'm a HS science teacher in an affluent suburb. We get this transfer kid in who is about 6'8", 350 long, thin Hulk Hogan mullet, not bald though, and big glasses. Mike hailed from the Howlers of Kentucky, thick southern accent, and was the most quotable kid I ever met. I hate books, Mr. XXXXX, they piss me off. My grandma made me sleep on the porch because she cooked some veggies, and I told her, dang it woman, where's the meat? I ain't never seen a pencil like this. Can I keep this and show my dad? Talking about a regular mechanical pencil. They threw me out of Golden Corral because I ate 8 of the steaks they had. I was pissed. Next time I'm trying for 9. And we were supposed to have a fire drill at like 1:55 or some odd time. At 1:57 he went ahead and pulled it, honest to God, thinking he would help out whoever forgot. Dance instructor. Student had one hemisphere of her brain removed as an infant, and she was paralyzed on one side. She said that she wanted to dance because she wanted people to see that she wasn't ashamed of her body. After months and months she finally managed one spin around. The other instructor cried. I cried. She cried. It was incredible. I had a junior 16 years old in my high school science course last year peel the strip of metal off the side of a ruler and proceed to stick each end of it into an outlet and shock himself. I saw the sparks out of the corner of my eye and he jumped up and his arm was in some significant pain. He said he did it because he wanted to see what would happen. Scientific method in action, I guess. I will never forget that, dumbus. I was still in high school myself when I joined a program to be a teacher's assistant at a nearby kindergarten. The kids were all so lovely and loving, and I enjoyed getting to know each of them as individuals. One day, midway through the year, we got a new little girl in the class. Serena was a quiet kid, but bright, attentive. She always ran up to hug me around the waist when I came into the classroom. At some point, the classroom teacher mentioned to me that the reason she was new to class was that she and her mom were living in the women's shelter in town. But that was all the information I had. A little over a month later, I came in one day and Serena didn't hug me. She was withdrawn by herself in a corner. And the teacher advised me that it was a bad day, so we weren't pressuring Serena to do any schoolwork. At one point I did go to check on her, and Serena started crying and clinging to me, telling me that she wanted to go home to her mommy. I gave her a hug and let her cry, but I felt totally helpless. I didn't really know what was going on, and I was only 17 myself. There wasn't anything I could do. The next time I came in to teach, Serena was gone, and I never saw her again. She'd be about 21 or 22 years old now. I had a 7th grader that was the biggest, happiest doofus. He actually was pretty intelligent, but he was such an open book and didn't put much effort into school that he came across as a bit of a fool. Other teachers treated him like a nuisance because he definitely was a distraction to other kids. He didn't try to be disruptive, he just was. But he lit up the room with positive energy and was genuinely happy to enjoy every moment of being alive. I didn't understand how his prior teachers were annoyed by him because he genuinely was a ray of sunshine and he made everyone a little happier by being in his presence. He was always smiling, always entertained by life, and it was contagious. Kind of like a human golden retriever. I helped him learn how to set school-related goals for himself and take more of an interest in the things we studied, and he was so proud of earning his first A in my class. The reason I will never forget him is because I wasn't yet a mother when I taught him, and I decided then that if I ever have kids, I hope they will be as happy as Oscar is. I would try to encourage their sense of wonder and fun, above all else. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video. And if you want to see more of Reddit Universe,